Hey, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unfeigned the podcast. I'm Jay. I'll be your host. And on this episode, we're going to dive into the season, the quote unquote season over the last 9 year journey, the season that I've called Kicked Out to Surrender. And that refers to the time when I was kicked out of the house until the time where I said, you know what, I can't take anymore. I just can't do it anymore. And I ended up surrendering. And we're going to talk about that. But I want to share a few things before we get going on this episode. Like I said on previous episodes, this podcast is not necessarily a marriage podcast, a relationship podcast. It's definitely not intended to just be stories of what happened to me over the last 9 years. And so my desire for this podcast is that it can help even just one person. Someone might be listening, or maybe they even know someone, and hopefully they'll pass this along to them, but that may be going through something, or maybe has gone through something, or maybe will go through something and they haven't got there yet. But my hope is that this podcast can provide some encouragement, some advice, some direction, some guys, whatever, that so even one person might be able to pull from. So that's my desire for this podcast. And I understand, I get it. From time to time, as I tell my story, I know that I'll get into sharing stories and things like that, but I just hope that it can help even just one person. So all that being said, I appreciate y'all. Anyone who might be listening, I appreciate y'all. And I hope that as you continue with me on this journey, that we'll grow together, that we'll heal together, that you would pass this on, you would share this podcast with anybody that you might know that could benefit from it. And again, as always, I would love to hear from you. So reach out, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. Again, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. All right, so let's dive in. So in the last episode, I said we would be getting into the point when I got kicked out. And I provided some history and some backstory leading up to it. But I want this episode to focus on, when I was kicked out and everything that went along with that. So I get kicked out of the house, and, the main goal, I guess you could say, was to secure a place. And friends of mine allowed me to stay in their house. They had a house, an extra house, and they allowed me to stay in it. And it ended up only being for a few months, but I was extremely grateful because that sort of bought me some time to try to figure out what to do. Now, if you've been in something like this, if you've gone through something like this, or you know someone who's gone through something like this, you may understand what I'm about to share. But my world was turned upside down. And when you're involved in something like this, when you're in the midst of it, uh, you don't act right. um, like my world was completely turned upside down, and I couldn't think straight. Um, it was almost like I was lost and I was wandering and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do about the future. I didn't know how to handle losing my family. I didn't know how to handle all the shame and regret and guilt I felt. I didn't know how to handle any of that. And it's like a situation um, where someone's in something and you have these opinions. You're like, well, why don't they just get out of it? Or why don't they just do this? Or why don't they just do this? And most times we have those opinions because we're not going through what they're going through. So we can't fully understand. We can't fully comprehend. And it's ignorant, but it's understandable because if you're not in it, if you haven't been in it, if you haven't gone through it, especially if you've never experienced it, then your opinions have an ignorance to them, right? Because you're saying, well, this is what I think they should do. Because based on my current situation, my current circumstances, which is not what they're going through, this seems simple. This is what you should do. And so if you have experienced something like what I experienced, then, maybe you understand. But my world being turned upside down turned everything upside down. And so you don't think clearly, right? And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to find what I needed to find regarding a place, and so I'm hit with, and I didn't know how to deal with all of what I was feeling about myself either. And so I'm bombarded with all of this, and fortunately, I'm extremely grateful. I'm extremely thankful that friends of mine allowed me to use this house that they had, that they allowed me to use that for a time. And they were so gracious. Um, I can't I can't even really explain. Like, words cannot even explain the gratitude I have um, for them allowing me to do that, because it got me through a really tough beginning, like a really tough beginning. And so fortunately, I'm able to stay in this place. And it was during this time when I started to lose everything. See, I was driving a truck at the time, and gas was extremely expensive, and everything, the house that I was staying in was a little over an hour away from everything that I was doing with my training and coaching and sports and teaching and everything like that. And so it was just over an hour away from all of that. And so driving that multiple times a day, that gets very costly. On top of that, life still happens, and I'm trying to remain as normal as possible. And so I still was doing the life things, that had to do with the kids, and just getting people places and being at things. And so with all of that driving, I was spending just about $1,500 a month in gas alone. I mean, it got crazy. Then you throw in the fact that being so far away affected what I was doing, because I couldn't necessarily schedule the same way I would when I lived so close, right? And certain timing of certain things were being affected. And so I started to slowly lose my business. And so you fast forward a little bit, I'm losing what I've been doing, the business that I've been doing. I'm losing that. Um, I'm spending all this money in gas and just in life, right? So gas was huge, but then you have all the life stuff too. So I'm spending money, I'm losing business, and my world is completely in chaos. And so in that state of mind, my life was just out of control. It was just spiraling out of control, right? And so it came time. There came a point in time when I no longer could stay at the house, and so it was at that moment that I became homeless. And I can look back now, and even during, I wouldn't say I joked about it, but it was it was said in jest. But I would call myself it was functional homelessness. The reason I say that is because I was homeless and I was living in my truck. And this homelessness lasted for approximately a year and a half. And nobody knew unless I told them. But you wouldn't know. I tried not to let anybody know. And so I still tried to do as much as I could. I still tried to live life as much as I could. Now it was extremely difficult, and it was very challenging. And the challenges that I faced were very real and very painful. But I didn't go around announcing, "Hey, I'm homeless." And no, I did what I could to seem normal. And for all appearance sake, to everyone on the outside, it wouldn't look like I was living in my truck and I didn't have anything. There were times when it wasn't uncommon. So it was very common for me not to eat for days, right? And as I continued to lose all the business that I had, right? Basically, it became that I was living on the money that made before I got kicked out. I was living on what I saved. And so I was quickly going through all the savings that I had. And any money that I made leading up to that point, um, I was quickly going through that, right? Because I basically lost everything. I lost everything. And partly because of the circumstances, but also partly because I was not in a good place. I was not in a good place in my head, um, in my motivation, like just in my life. I just was not in a good place at this point. Understandably, I get it, but so everything combined, all things considered, I lost everything. And so, and I'm skipping over details. And like I said, I'm an open book. I would be more than happy to talk with any of y'all about any of this. And if or I have a friend that's going through something or I know somebody or whatever, and I have questions about this specific thing you mentioned, because the details were left out, but I have some questions that I would love to talk to you. Reach out to me, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. That's the easiest way. That's the best way to reach out to me regarding this podcast. So, um, I'm skipping around a little bit just because of the nature of the podcast, but so I've lost everything at this point. So now I've lost everything. I'm homeless. I have no way of. I don't have no income. Okay. And I'm living out of my truck, right? And so, just a couple interesting things or challenging things, or so I would do whatever I could to make a little bit of money here and there. So if I found out that somebody needed help moving something, I would offer, or cleaning up something, I would offer. That wasn't making a living, but at times, I was making money so that I could eat, right, and have some gas. And so any money that I was making or would go to gas and food. I still wanted to go to my kids' things. I wanted to see my kids. And even though I didn't have a place to stay, I still wanted to see them. And that's another, the trauma that caused in my kids' lives. That's a whole nother story. But so any money I did make, it went to food and gas. And there were times that I was able to do that, but there were many more times when I wasn't able. I didn't have money. And so I'm living in my truck, trying to make money whenever I can and however I can. And it was very common for me not to eat for days. I mean, the longest stretch that I went without eating was 5 days. Over a year and a half, that happened multiple times. But usually it was 2 or 3 days where I wouldn't eat. And I there was some help along the way here and there, right? People helped along the way, and it wasn't a consistent thing, but it was here and there, and even some churches with some gas cards and some food money, stuff like that. So the whole point of this is, well, I'm bringing up these things just to paint a small picture of where the dark place I was in my life. Now, so I have challenges because I'm living in my truck. So I have to every night I have to find a place to park and sleep that I won't get in trouble by the cops or towed or whatever, right? So honestly, there was a rest stop on 77, I think it was. It's somewhere not far from South Carolina, the North Carolina-South Carolina border, but it was a rest stop. And I didn't know this at the time, but I figured that rest areas like that would be somewhere where they wouldn't like check on cars if they stayed overnight. Well, apparently this one, everybody did that, and it was like a common thing. So that became a place where I knew at least that I could sleep in my truck without getting in trouble by the cops. Now, I wouldn't say that I knew it was a safe place, because there were plenty of things that happened, there while I was parked and overnight, and so there were plenty of things that happened. And some of the stuff got a little bit dangerous, but it is what it is. But at least I knew I wouldn't get in trouble. At least I knew I could go and park. And so that, finding a place to sleep in my truck There was that. How am I gonna get food? There was that. How am I gonna seem normal? How am I gonna shower? Like, where am I gonna shower? Because I don't have a place. And so, when I did have money, I would save some so that I can shower in truck stops and things like that. Um, basically, I would shower anywhere I could find, like anywhere I could get into that had a shower, I would try to shower. Um, and but these are some of the challenges that we're going, and then all of this at the same time, like how do I conjure up enough normalcy as a dad, um, to be there for my kids' things and see my kids and hang out still. And so all of this is going on, and all at the same time, while all of this is happening, I am um I'm dying inside from the guilt and the regret and the shame. And I want to take a detour here for a second because me being homeless, there's a lot of people that didn't know. And I think that is a interesting picture, um, of what happened in my marriage because and I would almost dare to say that there's a lot of men that feel this way. There's women that feel the same way too, but I think with men, it becomes a tad bit different. And we're not getting into, if this is a podcast about men, but I do want to say that, um, in general, just you can't. There's always outliers, but you can't you can't base an argument on the outliers. You can't make an argument based on the outliers. You always have to argue in the general. So in general, men carry a different weight, a heavier weight than women do. Now, I'm just saying in general, and I wouldn't even say that that doesn't have to do with like what they have to do compared to what the women have to do, but I think what's expected of men, the pressure that's put on men, whether it's on purpose or not, um, it's very different and it's heavier. It's heavier. Plus, the way most men are wired, um, we tackle it by ourselves. And so we are fighting battles most people don't know anything about. And we say, we'll figure it out. I got this. Right. And it's like this false sense of strength because that's not strong. That's not strong. Right. But it's this false sense of strength that I'm going to handle this. I'm going to do this on my own. I can do it. I can take it, whatever it is. I'll beat it, whatever. And the same way, like when I was homeless, I didn't want, it's not like I was ashamed per se. I was ashamed, but it wasn't like an embarrassment. I was ashamed more than I was embarrassed. But I felt like I'm going to go at this alone. One, because this isn't anybody else's burden. I don't want to burden somebody. Right. So for me to ask help felt like I was casting a burden on someone else. Now, today, I'm a healed version of myself today. And I cannot wait till we get to that season of this 9-year journey. I cannot wait till we get there. I'm literally I'm so excited to get to that season because I'm my healed version of myself right now. And so my perspective on things are very different. My perspective on things are very different than they were back then. And this is, I don't get me wrong, and again, I can't wait to get to here to talk about this. And I have some challenges in my life right now. But there's an excitement about this season of life. And it's because I can live out of a healed version of myself. Anyway, back to what I was sharing. So just like being homeless and I got this. I don't need to burden anybody with this, right? I'll handle this alone. I used to say, I suffer in silence, right? And so there's that, right? But when I parallel that or I compare that to my marriage, I think that in many marriages, in far too many marriages, far too many relationships, period, but far too many marriages, I think that there's an element of that, and that slowly erodes the relationship. that slowly starts to break down the marriage. When one or the other spouse or both or whatever, when you don't allow your spouse, when you don't allow the other person to enter into that weakness, it begins to break down the relationship. Hear me what I'm saying, because it is a weakness. You know, us as men, we're always told that being vulnerable, I should say this, the common understanding as men is that vulnerability, transparency, um, emotion, empathy, sensitivity, all that's weak, right? That's the common understanding for men, that that's a weakness, right? We got to be tough and strong and emotionless, and we got to fight, right? And we got to take care of things, and we got to handle things, and we got to support things, and we have to make it happen. We have to find a way. We can't be depressed. We surely can't admit that we don't know how to do something. We surely can't admit that we don't know something, or we don't know how to do something, or we don't know what to do or what to say. We can't admit that. Now, subconsciously, everyone puts that pressure on us as men. And again, this isn't a podcast about men and women, but that's sort of the common understanding for men in general. Again, we're speaking in general. So in a relationship, especially as a man, but if any of you are saying, listen, I don't want to be perceived in a certain way, so I'm not going to let my spouse or my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my partner, whatever, like I'm not going to let this other person into that space, because if they know, if they only knew that I'm insecure, how would they think about me? How would they see me then? If they only knew that I didn't know what to do, if they only knew that I didn't have it figured out, that I don't think I can do this, that I don't know how to do this, I don't know what to do. If they only knew that, what would they think of me? How would they see me? Would they think I failed them? I don't want to feel like a failure. And so what we do is the same thing I do when I was homeless, right? I was a functioning homeless person, functional homelessness. So you know what you do? You are a functional husband or a functional wife or whatever, however you want to describe it. But all of a sudden, then you keep the other person just far enough away where they don't recognize your insecurities. The problem is you're slowly destroying the relationship. And you're creating this space between you and your spouse, or you and your whatever relationship you're in. You're creating this space between you two, and the longer you live that way, the greater the space becomes between you. And so, when I was homeless and doing all that, I mean, it's ironic, because that is sort of like a glimpse of what was happening in my marriage. Right. So back to being homeless, those are some of the challenges, like trying to find a place to park the car so I can sleep, trying to find a place to shower, trying to figure out how to eat, trying to figure out how to see my kids, trying to figure out how to get to things, trying to figure out how to deal with all the guilt, shame, and regret. And then at the same time, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess, out of this hole that I've dug, right? You take all of that and you surround that with your world being totally out of control. Your mind not being right, your world being turned upside down, not being able to think straight, depression, and it makes for a very dark place. So as I'm uh, as I'm functioning as a homeless person, some of the other things I had to deal with were, and we do this, and um, these things that I'm mentioning, I also have a challenge for all of us, but these things that I'm mentioning, like we do this as humans. I think it's innate in us. It's unfortunate, and it was around this time that I started to adopt this mantra for my life. Right? Be curious, not judgmental. Right? And you may have heard that before. It was I forgot the name of the TV show, but he says it in there. It's a Walt Whitman quote, I think. But be curious, not judgmental. This is what that means to me. Because, well, here's what it means to me. Ask questions, don't assume. Ask questions, don't make assumptions. Because then you find out a person's story. You don't create this perspective of this person based on your own opinions. You don't project your feelings onto that person and say, this is what this person must be doing. Instead, you find out the truth. See, when you're curious and not judgmental, you seek the truth. You find the truth. You don't create your own story for this other person. And so, but as people, as humans, I mean, this is innate in us. We have sin inside of all of us. And so, it's natural for us to judge someone. We see someone, we judge them. We think something, we judge them, right? And so all of that's happening too. So I'm being, there's a story being created for me without consulting me, obviously, but there was a story being created for me where I was a character in this story, right? And and listen, I'm not saying one way or the other anything about it. I'm just saying that when people saw what they saw, they formed a judgment. When they thought what they thought, they formed a judgment. They had their opinions. They said, this must be truth. Also, there were bits and pieces of the circumstances that were being floated around, and people just filled in the blanks with their own opinions, agendas, feelings, thoughts. And so that's also what I was dealing with, because that was also being told to me. That was also being said to me. Is this what must be going on? When most of the stuff couldn't be further from the truth. And so the common theme became, you knew me, but you don't know me. You knew me, but you don't know me. The struggle for me during this time, well, one of the struggles for me during this time was to be shot with all these arrows. And I was being hit a lot, right? And so the struggle was to be, while I'm being pierced with all these arrows, I'm having to focus on me. I'm having to focus on getting myself right. Right? I couldn't worry about who I was in anyone else's story. I knew, I understood that I had to be, for certain people, I had to be the villain in their story, for their story to work out. For certain people, I had to be a certain type of character in their story for their story to work out, for it to be true. And the struggle for me during this time was, I really had to figure out what my perspective was going to be. And here's one challenge. And I apologize if this episode seems a bit like thinking out loud, a little random, but that's okay. Like I said, I want this podcast to be edited or unedited and raw and true and real. So one of the challenge, one of the things I want us to glean from this is um, our perspective. Our perspective will be influenced by our mindset. The mindset we have will form our perspective on things. So if my mindset was revenge, let's say, I needed these people to know the truth. I needed these people to know that what's being said about me is false and it hurts. And I need these people to know. And so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna yell back. I'm gonna yell back. And let me just say this. In the beginning, there was a lot of that. And it wasn't until I realized that my mindset affected my perspective. And so if that's my mindset, and my mindset is to be right, if my mindset was to be right, if I was more concerned about being right than getting right, if I was more concerned about being the one who had the last word more than being healed, I never would have been healed. Because I would have only been concerned about being right or being the one that said the last word or spoke the loudest. But I realized that my mindset changes my perspective. So the mindset I developed was, no matter how much I'm being pierced by all these arrows, my mindset had to be, for me to be anything to any of the people that I loved and cared about, I had to get right. I had to heal. And so you take everything that I've talked about up until right now, everything that I mentioned on this episode, and all of that is happening. All of that's going on at the same time I'm trying to figure out how to heal. I was in a dark place because here's the funny thing. Not fun. Side note, I don't know why we say that all the time. We always say, hey, you want to hear something funny? Or the funny thing is, but it's not really funny. So don't really know why we say that. So an interesting thing is I learned when I say the people that I love and the people I cared about, I learned who actually loved me and cared about me. I learned very quickly who it would be that I would allow in my life, that I would allow into any space, any intimate space in my life. I'm sure that you could think of a time or an experience that you've been through or know somebody that's been through, and you can say that you really find out who cares about you during those times. You see their true colors, right? So all of that is going on. All of this is happening, all of these challenges. And again, I can go into detail into a lot of these. Living as a homeless person presents a lot of challenges. All of that's going on, but I realize I have to change my mindset. If I want my perspective to change, I have to change my mindset first. It's not circumstances first and then all the other stuff. It's your mind first. You have to change your mindset first. And so my mindset became 100% directed towards healing. That made things even more difficult because me wanting to heal meant that some people might get hurt. Me wanting to heal meant that some people may have had to be held back a bit until the appropriate time, until I was a better version of myself. Because I realized that until I could heal, I couldn't be a good dad. In the place that I was, the dark place that I was in my life, unless I climbed out of that, unless I got out of that, unless I figured out how to get out of that place, I couldn't be a good dad. I couldn't be a good friend. I couldn't be a good person. I couldn't be a good employee. I couldn't be a good anything. And so I had to change my mindset. And I don't know. Here's a challenge to us, because I think a lot of times we want to we want like a magic formula, right? And for a lot of things, there are 12-step programs, there are 7 steps to this, there are these do this, and this will be the outcome. There are those things, and I get that. But for many more things, there isn't a magic formula. Here's what it comes down to. Here's the magic bean. Right? What it comes down to is simply a choice. Just a choice. And you're either going to choose one way or the other way. It will always come down to a willingness to ... or an unwillingness to ... And to some of you, that may seem really oversimplified, but it's not. I think we overcomplicate things. It really is as simple as making a choice. Now, I say simple, it's not easy. There's a huge difference between simple and easy. And so I think it has to start with a choice, and that's simple, because you just make the choice. Then it becomes not so easy, because now there's things that choice will affect. And after the choice comes a commitment. So you make the choice to break an addiction. Well, that's simple. That's really simple. You just say, I'm not going to do that drug anymore. That's super simple. Not easy, super simple though, right? The choice is simple. I'm not going to look at pornography anymore. The choice is simple. I'm not going to speak harshly to my kids anymore. I'm not going to be angry with my wife anymore. I'm not going to resent this person. I'm not going to lash out at this person. I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to be a selfish asshole anymore. I'm not going to be, and the list goes on and on and on. But it's very simple, because it just starts with a choice. You just make the choice. You're either going to make the choice to heal from those things, or you're going to make the choice to continue doing those things. You're either going to be willing to change, or you're going to be unwilling to change. Now, the hard part comes after that, because that's the commitment. That's the hardest part. So you make the choice, but then you have to make a commitment to yourself. You have to make a commitment that no matter how hard it gets, no matter how tempted you are, no matter what obstacles there are, no matter what lies you might be hearing, no matter what you believe or being convinced about yourself, no matter what, it is non-negotiable. There is no negotiating. You made the choice. The next step has to be a commitment. There is no other step. You make the choice, and now you commit. That period. Because if you're not willing to commit, your choice means nothing. You didn't really make a choice. You just said the words. But if you really want to change, if you really want to heal, and this was huge for my healing journey, where my healing really began, this was huge. So please listen to this. I had to make a choice. And I chose to heal. In the midst of all the chaos surrounding me, in the midst of all the loss, all the guilt, all the shame, all of the hurt, all of the realizations of the pain that I've caused, all of the destruction, all the anger, all the sadness, all the depression. In the midst of all of that, I made a choice, and my choice was to heal. I needed to be better. I had my reasons for those choices. You always should have a why. I raised my kids to always have a why. You should always have a why. There should always be a reason for everything you do. No questions asked. There should always be a reason. I'm not saying that your reason might not be a good one. I don't know. But you should always have a reason for everything you do. You should have a why. And I had my why. Sometimes it was plural, but I had my why. I had my reasons. But I made a choice. But then I had to commit, because the choice is simple. The commitment is difficult. The commitment is what's not easy. And so I had to commit, and I had to commit to doing things, and I had to commit to being certain ways. And that was hard, and I didn't always get it right, especially in the beginning. Man, I failed. I failed miserably in the beginning. But I always went back to my commitment, and I had to do a lot of repenting. I had to do a lot of asking for forgiveness. I had to do a lot of apologizing. I had to do a lot of crying. Oh my God, the amount of tears that I cried. I had to do a lot of soul searching, right? Because you make a choice to be better. You make a choice to heal. You make a choice, whatever that choice is that you're going to do from there or not do from there. You make that choice. It doesn't all of a sudden just turn around. It's not a magic pill. I mean, I know I called it the magic bean, but that wasn't appropriate because it's not magic. Because it doesn't just turn around just like that. But the choice is the start. You can't commit to doing these things without making the choice. It's impossible. You cannot make the commitment without making the choice. And you can't make the choice without making the commitment. Like trying to commit to certain things without actually making a choice, you're just saying words. It's going to die out. It's not going to last because you never really made the choice, so you've given yourself an out. Right? So there really isn't a commitment without the choice. Now, you can say I'm making this choice, but if you don't commit, that choice means nothing, and nothing will ever change. So those two have to be together. Those two have to happen. The choice has to be made first. That's simple. Then you commit. You make a commitment, and the commitment is hard because you have to confront everything. Listen to me. You have to confront everything that speaks against that commitment, that wants to contradict that choice. And whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, we have a very real enemy in the world. Okay? The Bible says that Satan just kind of, he's wandering the earth looking to find who he can kill and destroy. It's not some fun comic book story, right? And he doesn't always just go around saying, "Zap, you're dead." I mean, the comforting thing is he can't do anything without God's permission. That's another story, but we have a very real enemy, and Satan will very subtly try to plant these lies and these contradictions. And he's I heard this somewhere, and this is amazing. I think this is amazing. So like, I'm very passionate about sports training, very passionate about it in coaching. Right. And if you do something 100 times, you probably become pretty good at it. Right. If I have an athlete and I'm training him, or even if I'm the athlete or you're the athlete or whatever, if you do something 100 times, you probably get pretty good. Right. If you do it 1,000 times, now you're getting really good. Right. You do it 10,000 times, you're on your way to becoming an expert in whatever that discipline is or that skill or whatever. Satan has had generations, millennia, to figure out humans, to figure out the best way to deceive us. You don't think he's going to be good at it? He's been doing it for generations, for millennia, many millennia. He's been doing it. You don't think he's an expert at it? And so your commitment becomes hard because this is important. You have to confront everything. You don't get to, when you made that choice to heal, when you make that choice to be better, you don't get to pick and choose. Not if you want true healing. If you want to heal for real, you don't pick and choose the things you want to keep around or the things you don't want to do. You choose to heal, period. And then that commitment becomes hard because now you have to confront everything that stands in the way. Everything that comes against that choice and that commitment. And if you do that, if you do those things, you'll find healing. The process will be different for everyone. The journey will be different for everyone, but you will find true healing. And so I made that commitment. I made that choice to heal, to be better. I had my reasons, and then I made the commitment, and I had to confront. So you got a choice. You have a commitment, and then you confront. Choice, commit, confront. Right? The choice. When you choose to do that, the choice is simple. The commitment becomes difficult. It's not easy. The confrontation, that's painful. That's scary. But I made a choice, and I made a commitment that became non-negotiable. And it was difficult, man. It was hard because it didn't always go the way I wanted it to go. And I felt like my world, my life was just in constant chaos. It was spiraling out of control. And I got to the point, now I said this on a previous episode, I had 3 reasons why I would never kill myself. Those 3 reasons were my 3 children. We can have an argument, debate, conversation about whether or not those should be reasons or not, or why, all that. Those were my 3 reasons. Those are the 3 reasons I got up. Those are the 3 reasons I breathed. When I was homeless and had nothing, now at this point I have nothing. I have zero, nothing. I have a car and that's it. Whatever I had at the house that I was able to take is in storage. So I have nothing. And I'm fighting, I'm clawing, I'm scraping, and I'm trying to figure out how to make ends meet just to get gas and food. Sometimes I couldn't even do that. The whole time, I'm also trying to figure out how to get out of this dark place, this hole, right? I'm trying to find a job. I'm trying to figure out how I can get a place to live, all these things, right? All the tangible life type stuff. But this commitment that I made became extremely difficult because I had to confront everything. And I got to this point where I understood the thought of taking my own life. I even got to the point where I was thinking about doing it. Not actually doing it, but doing it. I knew that I wouldn't do it because of those 3 reasons that I had. My children saved my life. They don't know that. That's not their burden to carry. But it's true nonetheless. It's not something that to make into something. It's not a thing to be made into something. It's just true. I couldn't do that to my kids. And so while I got as close as I probably will ever get in my entire life, well, I can say that for certain. I got as close as I will ever get in my entire life to taking my own life. I wouldn't have done it because of those 3 reasons. But that's the place I got to. That's how dark it got. That is how difficult it got to remember the choice I made, to honor the commitment I made, and then to follow through and confront everything. And I couldn't do it anymore. I had nothing left. I couldn't do it anymore. I wanted to give up. I just wanted to give up. And I remember I was in a parking lot, and in this parking lot, there was a church. And I remember going into the church, and I remember falling on my knees. I remember there being a huge cross at the stage, the front of the church. And I remember falling on my knees because I'd given up. I fell on my knees and I surrendered. I surrendered everything. And I said, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it. I don't want to even live. I give up. And I surrender my entire life to you. Now, I had already been a Christian. I had already been saved. God had already rescued me and saved me. I had already been a Christian. But I had never surrendered my life. And on that day, while I'm on my knees, bowing before a cross, crying out to God, I surrendered my life. Everything. I surrendered everything. And I went down the list, man. I went through everything. And I surrendered it all. And it was at that moment that things started to change. Not necessarily the circumstance, because I was still homeless, but my perspective. See, my mindset changed. I changed my mindset, and that ultimately changed my perspective. I started to see my family different. I started to see my situation different. I started to see everything differently. And it started because I decided I needed to change my mind. My mindset had to change if I wanted my perspective to change, because my perspective sucked. My perspective was the gates of hell. That's where I was. And I know you may or may not get the full picture on this episode because of all the details I've left out, and that's fine. I would love to have conversations, more intimate conversations with any of you. If you would like to, reach out, email me. But that was my perspective. My perspective was the gates of hell, and I was sitting at the gates of hell. And when I changed my mindset, my perspective started to change. And man, when I surrendered my life, I had a brand new perspective about everything. And it wasn't all roses at that point. It didn't all of a sudden just everything got good. If anything, it became more confusing because I don't know how I had a peace about all of the life that I was living. I don't know how I could have a perspective that I did. So it became confusing, but I understood my mindset changed, my perspective changed. I surrendered my life. I gave up control. And I'll tell you what, when I fell before that cross to surrender my life, I thought I was in such a terrible place. I felt it. I felt like I was in the darkest place of my entire life. I've never been in a darker moment in my entire life. Let me say this, because we're going to get on another episode. We're going to get to a point where I think the place in my life where I got to would rivaled it, but I was in such a dark place and I felt it and I thought it was terrible. And here, in reality, I know this now. In reality, that was the best place I could have been. That's the best place I could have been, because who I was prior to 2016 Who I was not who I was supposed to be. The person I was not the person I was created to be, was not the person I'm supposed to be, was not the person God intended me to be. And I don't know how long it would have taken or if I would have ever gotten there had I not got to that place. And again, don't hear me wrong. I am not saying that the divorce happened to me and all that. But what I am saying is everything that happened up until that point of being on my knees and surrendering, God used that to make me into the person He meant for me to be. I could now step into the person I'm supposed to be. And so it was at that moment that everything changed for me. I still had sucky circumstances that I had to sift through. I still had guilt, shame, regret, pain, broken relationships, a lot of healing to do, confusion, depression. I still had all that. But you know what? My perspective about it all was different. I wasn't stuck anymore. God, that's huge. Feeling stuck and trapped in the same circumstances is very different than being in the same exact circumstances and feeling free. And that's what I felt at that moment. And it all started with a mindset shift, right? I changed my mindset because I wanted my perspective to be different. I wanted things to be different, plain and simple. I wanted it to be different. But I knew I had to change my mind first. And it started with a choice, a simple choice to heal, to be better. And I could go down the list of all the things that I wanted to change. I didn't want to be this anymore. I didn't want to be this anymore. I wanted to do more of this. I didn't want to do this anymore. I definitely wanted to continue healing in this area. And I could go down the list, and that's the choice. But then I made a commitment. And this has become a staple over my life since then. There's a lot of people that knew me that don't know me now. There's very few people that actually know me now. But if you know me now, you know how important it is if I make a commitment to myself. So it started with a choice. And I made that commitment. And then I started to confront everything. Y'all, thank you so much again for listening to this podcast, for being a part of this journey with me. Thank you so much for all the notes and comments and emails or whatever. And thanks for reaching out. I hope that this podcast can be an encouragement. I hope that it maybe can even help you not feel alone in something. I hope that it gives you some hope. I'm real. I've been in it. I'm still in a lot of stuff, right? Like life still happens. But I'm a healed version of me now. And to end this podcast, I just want to give you a glimpse into what a healed version of me looks like, right? So I've been healed from a few things, and I'm healing in many other things, right? I won't be 100% the person I'm supposed to be until I'm up in heaven. I get that. But man, I'm loving this journey. And there have been some extremely destructive and painful things that have happened. And there still are some things I'm dealing with that are extremely painful. But I'm loving this journey because I'm healed. I'm healed from so many things, and I'm healing, and I can feel that, and I'm different. And some of those things are, some things I've been healed from was impatience, anger, lust, right? Pornography, selfishness. This idea that I'm better than you. Controlling. There's a few things I've been healed from, that chains have been broken regarding. Now, I'm human and sinful, and so Satan loves to try to have these things creep back up, and these things creep back up from time to time. But my healed version, me in this healed version of me, I recognize it, and I know how to deal with it. So I don't fall back into that vicious cycle of breaking a habit, returning to the habit, breaking the habit, doing it again, stopping, doing it again, stopping, doing it again. And that vicious cycle that you never really get out of anything. You just pause it. Right? I'm not there anymore. I'm not there. I'm healed. And so when those things come up again, they're quickly gone because I deal with them. I don't have to live in those spaces anymore because I can live in this healed, free life. So y'all, thank you so much, really. And I just hope that this is encouraging to anyone listening. If you know anyone that might be encouraged, share this podcast. You can get it on Spotify right now. I'm trying to figure out how to get it on all the other platforms. I know it's not super complicated. I just have to go in and do it. But it will soon be available on all the other platforms. But right now, go to Spotify. You can search Unfeigned. You can also just go into one of the episodes. I think I put a link in there. Each time I put up like a little slide on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, there's a link to the Spotify, on Spotify to the podcast. So if you haven't followed it, follow it so that you are made aware of any new episodes. Something cool, I'm just going to throw this out there since we're ending this episode. Something that I'm excited about that might be pretty cool is I'm going to do some other things with this podcast, so that it might include some video stuff, some live stuff. So look out for that. I'll put stuff up on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, social media, whenever that happens. But I'm just excited to be able to tell my story. It's extremely scary, but I'm just excited to tell my story about my journey of healing, with the purpose of trying, somebody hopefully being encouraged and hopefully being helped. So again, reach out, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you for listening. And until next time, see you then.